relief. Like, I get to go to a new city. Those guys play together. They're all young. Like, that's the best fit I could have possibly been in. Right?
2020 first round champion, Denver Nuggets,
A little excitement.
We are not part of the Uninterrupted. I just want to make that very clear.
You what?
We are not part of the Uninterrupted. We didn't change affiliation.
Yeah. No affiliate. I'm incredibly hyped. Holy Nikes, what a good video.
Sick video.
It's so good.
I like RJ Hampton. He's got some good vibes. My dogs also very much like him. As
Is
soon
that
as they
it?
start recording, they start going crazy. Yeah, they're very.
They just
very hyped for it.
they just love draft day. Who doesn't?
They love draft day. They love free agency, no matter what happens. So, welcome in everybody to an emergency edition of the DNVR Nuggets podcast, the DNVA show here live. A lot of people joining. I'm seeing in the comments for the first time. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button so you never miss us. We're going to talk today about the first 24 hours of free agency, which feel like the first week of free agency. I mean, think about all the things that have happened in the last 24 hours. It's been crazy. And here to help me talk about that, the man with the wind in his hair, it's Harrison Wind.
The Mike Miller, RJ Hampton Nuggets connection is just like so pure. I'm so here for it, man. We need Mike Miller. I know he's like, I don't really know what he's doing. There was like a rumor he's going to become an agent. I don't really know, but we need him back in the Nuggets circle of trust.
He kind of is. Now
yeah.
Now I think
he probably is.
I think he's an agent now for RJ Hampton. So I think there's a little.
Can we talk about his flow a little bit? Did you see the flow on Mike Miller?
Always has had a great flow.
Incredible.
He's like it's like a mane of a lion.
They're telling me my mic is soft here again, so I'm going to bump this up.
You might be soft, but Eric just might be really hot.
Oh, am I hot?
You're always hot.
Ooh, all right.
Let me adjust the mic here for a second. How are we doing now? This maybe that helped. All right, so and then of course D-Line Co. You know him as D-Line Co.
Listen to the afterthought. That was disgusting. What a terrible intro.
Barely remembered to shoot all. Let me know in the comments if this is if my mic's coming in a little bit cleaner. If not, I'm gonna have to maybe do a couple crazy things. But guys, so many things happened. So to recap, over the top of what happened over the last couple hour or day and a half roughly. Well, actually, let's go 3 days. You know, the Nuggets obviously draft Zeke Nnaji and RJ Hampton with the 22nd and 24th pick. They trade in to get those picks. They add Facu Campazzo from Europe, 5'11", wizard of a point guard. And then all eyes turn to signing Jerami Grant. And we went live yesterday. We talked about this, our instant reactions. I think today we're going to have a little bit more of our poised, thoughtful, reflective, responses to this. I know I've been on the phone quite a bit today, Harrison. I know you have been as well. So kind of gathering some different information, different perspectives on what happened. We're going to talk about Jerami Grant. The Nuggets entered the postseason. By their account, with Jerami Grant as the top priority for them. Some crazy things happened in between. I think we have more clarity on. We're going to talk about that. So people saying that Adam's mic is good. Adam's mic is a 5. Eric, you're at a 7. So you might have to turn down. Actually, I think I can get you, Eric. I want to make sure this is right because we got edit mic settings. Let me bring you down.
Maybe I'll just shut my effing mouth. How's that?
I got you.
Would that make you people happy? Why don't you put it at 0?
Put it at 0. But Jerami Grant's gone. And there's a lot of crazy little details to kind of talk about with that one. Paul Millsap returns. That happened today. $10 million, 1 year. 1 year, so one more year for Paul Millsap. Greg Whittington, we're going to find out who this guy is, why he was added, what maybe he's bringing to the table. And then what other one? What am I forgetting here? There's one other I have it gone. Torrey Craig, gone, and also JaMychal Green replacing Jerami Grant, kind of. I mean, coming into the roster, and I'm kind of excited about that. So first, though, let's start about Jerami Grant, and let's talk about that one. You know, yesterday we obviously went live with our sort of instant reaction, and it was, I think, emotional in a lot of ways because it was just such a shock. I mean, the shock value of Jerami Grant being gone. In my head, this was a 99.9% done deal. I think for the Denver Nuggets, the read I get on it was for them. They felt very strongly that he was coming back. They felt pretty great about their chances to bring him back all offseason, even all the way up until yesterday. $20 million gets an offer from Detroit. Denver matches, says, hey, we'll do that too. That was, $20 million, certainly above everything we sort of expected, and I think would have been a bit of an overpay. But he says, no, thank you. I actually want to be in Detroit. I have a chance there to be a more impactful, like a lead player on that roster. I don't even know if that's true, to be honest. They have a lot of players, but he feels that way, and so he chooses there. Harrison, how has your perspective on that deal changed over the last 24 hours?
I think you're right when talking about just kind of the sticker shock of that decision, because you're totally correct. The entire offseason, the Nuggets talked about getting Jerami Grant back like it was a foregone conclusion. And I felt that way too, just from the conversations I had and how I was reading the situation. Until I'd say a couple of days before free agency started, I was actually tipped off that Detroit was going to come in with this exact offer. Right. And it seemed like blasphemous. $20 million for Jerami Grant? Right. But
it seems insane. Let's say it how it is. As an overpay.
Yeah, it's a huge overpay, a massive overpay. But I talked about it when we did the Instant Reaction podcast. There were a lot of factors pulling him to Detroit. The Troy Weaver connection.
Troy Weaver, by the way, from the DC area, right? And so, as is Jerami Grant. So there's, I think some connections going back there.
And he was also the assistant GM in Oklahoma City when Jerami Grant was there. Right. There's a strong connection there. But, as kind of the sticker shock wore off, I think the Nuggets are going to be okay. They rebounded by signing JaMychal Green, which we can talk about him. But I think they're going to be okay. Last night, it seemed like this could be potentially a disaster. I think they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Eric? What's your take on just the event of him not signing with Denver?
I think it was incredibly shocking. I mean, I was really I just felt like you needed to go on the air after that. Like, I told Adam Harrison, like the reason that I even know who Adam is because after that Tyler Lydon deal, like I was just looking for some sort of like explanation of the world. Like I was looking for
we all were
to
actually
sort of like talk about like what happened because I was just spinning out of control. Like none of it made any sense to me. So I don't remember exactly how, but I stumbled across you sort of talking about it, and I was like, dude, you got to go on again and sort of like give people perspective, give people some sort of inside information. Like I was there last night. I was just like behind the scenes. I was like, no one needs to hear my dumb joke idiot face like at this exact moment in time. So that is telling me that it was like a super emotional thing. It really felt like brings up feelings of like inadequacy as a fan base. Like, yo, like what can we do to keep people?
Oh, those feelings I think were really hard, and that's part of it. Tim Conley during his era has really talked about bringing in culture guys that want to be here, and I think you see RJ Hampton and how excited he was to be a part of that. That's why we played the clip here, is because we were talking beforehand. What clip should we go with? It's like we want the fan base to feel good about it. We just got dumped, right? And we even got dumped by the like fourth or fifth best player on the roster, which is even kind of weirder. It's one thing if you're dumped by LeBron James leaves you at the altar or something, but when you're like, hey, Jerami Grant's too good for us, like come on, man. We in a lot of ways, Jerami Grant went from being a guy that like the diehards knew to like his profile really raised, I think, from being with Denver and with the way the playoffs ended. So in a lot of ways, you just kind of feel almost used or whatever, and you get all of those like, look, Jerami Grant was a free agent. He had the right to go wherever he wanted. He had the right to not tell the Denver Nuggets what his plan was and to maybe, you could say, maybe lead him on, which I kind of feel like. Again, I'm not reporting this, but I'm saying from every account we have, from every quote that's coming out, and of course, from everything we know about this Harrison, it does feel a lot like the Nuggets weren't aware that this is what they wanted, and we're led to believe that he wanted to be here as well. He says as much publicly in all of his comments, his exit, whatever interviews he had leaving the season. So I think that you did feel quite dumped by it. And then I see people saying, here's the thing about he wanted a bigger role. Doesn't quite feel completely. Of course, anytime a player leaves, there's probably a lot of reasons. Maybe there's main reasons. Jerami Grant had a fine role in Denver. He was an important player. He was an important piece. He started in the playoffs. It was clear he was going to start this next season and be on a title contending team. So either you were signaling that going to Detroit, where I'm not sure he's actually going to have a bigger role, but maybe for a team that probably isn't going to contend versus staying in Denver, maybe that was part of the equation. I'm not trying to say he's, it's not all of it, but I just don't feel like that it doesn't line up to me. That does, it feels like that's part of the story, not the whole story. And I think that's what's so frustrating about it. The one thing I will say, Jerami Grant, the Nuggets didn't appear to know what this was the way things were going to shake out, but at least it shook out on day one and early enough that Denver could adjust and get JaMychal Green. If you remember with Andre Iguodala, what was it, 3 days passed before Andre Iguodala's out the door, not letting Denver know what they're doing, and by that point, everybody had been signed. You can imagine what would have happened if JaMychal Green had already signed. Do you remember? If Paul Millsap had already signed, and Denver's sitting here going, well, now what? So at least if Nuggets want to look on the bright side, at least there was that. Yeah. Do you remember how? Essentially, Golden State gave us a pity pick back by turning it into a sign-in trade, and it was like it was like, here you go, you sad losers. Like, you could take
take this second rounder and shut up.
Just go away, like, because we were just put in such a terrible position. Exactly that. Like,
so I want to put this out here because I get this question a lot. We're getting it from Levi Hunt here. How much do you think Denver's cheap ownership factored into Grant's decision, training facilities, etc.? I don't know. I mean, when you talk about like the little amenities that come with it, I don't know. What I will say is this wasn't. And I saw a lot of people on the timeline last night that just don't. Even some like analysts or media people that maybe don't just cover the Nuggets, who cover a lot of things, saying Kroenke's getting cheap again. I believe that the Nuggets really did match that offer. Yesterday I was a little more skeptical about it. Wasn't sure. I believe that they did, and I think you would have heard now from enough sources if that wasn't the case or this or that. The Nuggets were willing to pony up the money. Second of all, it doesn't even have to do with were they willing to pay $20 million. It has more to do with you only have so many resources in the NBA, and do you want to allocate $20 million, $20 million worth of resources to a player that, if you win a championship, I think is at best your fourth best player, maybe your fifth best player, maybe your sixth best player. Those are the type of moves that get teams into purgatory. They end up overcommitting to guys they can't afford to lose. Now, maybe Denver could have adjusted down the road and traded him or this or that. You could make that argument, but at the end of the day, none of this matters. Jerami Grant chose Detroit over Denver. It wasn't the other way around. Denver didn't choose not spending the money than spending the money on Jerami Grant.
And it wasn't about the money, like you mentioned, Adam. Right. From everything we heard, Denver was willing to up their offer to $20 million. But from what I kind of feel the situation was like, it's almost like Jerami Grant had his mind made up before free agency started.
100%.
And it really wasn't going to matter what the Nuggets came back with. He was already dead set on going to Detroit. It feels like that deal was already I don't know, like a handshake agreement or whatever. We know these things happen. And it seemed like he had already just made up his mind, and the Nuggets just were kind of in the dark. That's at least my read on it.
An opportunity. I mean, I really do think that you start putting pieces together here. But again, the idea of going to a familiar crew, people that he already knew in Detroit, I think has as much to do with it as anything. And, the bigger role, the promises. I mean, you can imagine having a connection to someone and someone telling you like, hey man, come join me, come join your boys. And I'm going to give you this. And you're going to be we're going to make you a featured player and this or that. It just becomes more, I guess that's what the call was for Jerami Grant. So
that part of it's still like a little wild to me, because I can see how a guy like Jerami Grant, 26 years old, just had this like breakout run in the playoffs, how him potentially being that quote unquote number one option, that can be appealing. But I'm worried that life's going to come at him awfully fast. And he's going to find out pretty quickly how much tougher it is playing basketball without Nikola Jokic. Like, that's his right. And I applaud him for wanting that challenge of being the number one guy. But I don't think he's that guy. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I just don't think he's that guy.
I would love to fail at $60 million, though. I'd like to, you know what, DNVR,
screw
you guys. I'm going to start my own company. It didn't work out, but you know what?
That would suck, though. Like, if you became like a Nicholas Batum, like somebody that just everybody recognizes as an anchor, like the reason the team couldn't be good because they had to pay you. Like that, you don't want that either.
So good if it weren't for D-line. Like, they could just cut that salary there.
Wait a minute, are you guys offering me $20 million? Is that what I'm to pick up on this? All right, I accept.
We're going to stretch it over 5 years so we can sign somebody new.
No, that's fine.
So I agree with you. I mean, nothing against him. I don't think he's a lead guy. But you know, like I said, I don't know that he's gonna regret this decision for whatever that's worth. It is funny. I saw on Twitter, somebody put out he wears number 9. Andre Iguodala wears number 9. Retire the number. Just get rid of it.
You don't retire the number. You dispose of the number.
Dispose of the number. It's no longer. Nobody could ever wear number 9.
Did you see? It's because it's German for no. 9?
Is that what it is? See, I didn't know. was trying to piece together what it was, and now that makes so much sense. There's a little nugget for you. You didn't, but a lot of people didn't know that. So here's a couple ways where I differ a little bit from yesterday. Yesterday, I put a lot of the onus on the front office because, and I still do, like in this way, they didn't know. And look, sometimes players don't let you know. Sometimes players lead you on. Sometimes players go silent. Sometimes players do these different things. But I do feel like Denver, and I think they probably readily admit this, we'll probably hear from Tim Connelly when all of this is done and all the contracts are signed and everything. I imagine he will say some form of, we felt like we had this one done, it got away. And I think that even they have to take a little bit of ownership of that. Now, did they just get screwed over? Yes, I think that's a big part of what happened, and sometimes that happens, but it doesn't matter. Sometimes when that happens, it harms you. But the one thing I will say is that, especially, and I put this thread out on Reddit today, I think a lot of people saw it because it got a lot of traction, but it's how I honestly feel, and I'm not trying to put the rosy glasses on for this one. I said all year that I thought Jerami Grant was quite a bit overrated by Denver Nuggets fans, and even going into free agency, because I thought that he unlocked Denver's best lineup going forward, which would be Michael Porter and Nikola Jokic in the front court. You have to sandwich them by a guy. I explained, Jerami Grant being a guy that can defend the 3 or the 4, that means you put him on whichever forward spot is the better player, and Michael Porter can always take the lesser forward on the defense, and that's a huge benefit. Mm-hmm. You take that away now, and I think that's the biggest loss, but that's a postseason loss. Not to diminish it, because let's be honest, if the Nuggets with this roster go into the postseason right now, I don't feel great about it. Some teams in the West got a lot better, and I think Denver got less versatile, and that's in a playoff series, you're going to have to play a bunch of different types. So in that way, I think the Denver Nuggets got worse, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat that. But when we look at the regular season, and we're going to talk about JaMychal Green in a second, I actually, and the numbers bear this out, Jerami Grant in the regular season was one of the biggest negatives on the roster. That whole second unit was so negative because of how bad they were as a 5-man unit. But this is a rare thing. If we go across the last 3 seasons, if you share the court with Jokic and Murray, regardless of who else is on the court, if you share the court with them, you're almost certainly a positive. Jerami Grant was a negative this season when he shared the court with those guys. That's a really, really rare thing. Now, individual net ratings, there's a lot of noise in there, but we can at least look at 30, 40 players that have shared the court with Murray and Jokic and be like, okay, a lot of positives in there. Who are the negatives? Trey Lyles, Emmanuel Mudiay. Like, okay.
Mudiay was the first one I thought of.
Yeah, and so it's like, okay, if you got 40 players that are positive and 2 that are negative, and then you're in that company, there's probably at least something there. So my perspective, the reason I go on this long-winded rant here, and tell me if you agree or not, I feel like Denver in the regular season can mitigate what they lost in Jerami Grant. I don't want to say without skipping a beat, but I will say possibly without skipping a beat, especially if they get contributions from guys like Michael Porter, who's a question mark, and maybe from a Bol, a Gary Harris, a little bit better Barton. But I just think Denver's set up to not skip a beat in the regular season.
Yeah, I agree. If you think back to last regular season, Jerami Grant was not like this standout guy night in, night out like he was in the playoffs when obviously injuries happened to Will Barton. He was elevated to this clear 3rd most important player. He was not anything close to that guy in the regular season. He was on that second unit playing next to Mason Plumlee, playing next to Torrey Craig and Monte Morris and whoever else was out there. And he was just, a quality role player. That's who he was. He didn't really stand out like he did in the playoffs. And I think if you sub JaMychal Green in there, I honestly don't think the bench unit is really going to drop off from where it was a year ago. It might even be better, to be quite honest, because I think JaMychal Green does some stuff at the 4 with his rebounding, with his just physicality that Denver really missed on that second unit with Jerami Grant at the 4. So I don't think it's going to hurt them.
I guess I was going to say, I'd go as far as to say that JaMychal Green at the power forward, I think is actually a really big upgrade over Jerami Grant at the power forward.
Right.
I don't think that's true at the small forward spot, so that's where you lose, is that versatility. Yeah. But during the regular season, I think you get less of that and more of just, you're this position, you're this position, you're this assignment, whatever.
Yeah. So I don't think in the regular season they're going to see a big drop-off. But you're right. In the playoffs, JaMychal Green is not a 3. He's not a guy who can go between a ton of positions and defend. He's a 4 or 5 defensively. So that's going to hurt. And I think looking at this roster right now, there's just such a clear hole for a defensive stopper on the wing. If I'm Denver, I'm trying to find that guy before the trade deadline because I don't think you can go into the playoffs with this roster right now and expect to advance super far.
How hard do you think it would be to find just a pure defensive specialist that is just like a badass defender, but maybe doesn't even bring anything to the offensive end.
They're
Like,
to be
how
found.
rare are
I mean,
those guys?
I think it's easier than finding the opposite, just
Right.
because offense gets you paid, defense. I mean, you have to be bringing something. So I think it is doable. We're gonna get to. I was gonna go somewhere with that, Eric, because one of the things, and I'll tease it. I don't think the Nuggets roster that they have right now it will necessarily be the roster that they go into the postseason with next year. And so if we're talking, and we happen to agree with this, we'll find out. There is the injury concern is real because now you're really relying on Michael Porter. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, Jerami Grant being gone, the Nuggets are all in on Michael Porter this season. There's no other option. I mean, they've got an enormous amount of guards. They've got a handful of bigs, although some of them are a little deeper on the rotation. But you look at the small forward position, it's Michael Porter Jr., it's Keita Bates-Diop. I think it's Will Barton, who we're not even sure is going to be healthy for the start of the season. We'll probably get an update on that, in a week and a half or so, as training camp's only a week away. So right now, you're so thin there that the Denver Nuggets are all in on Michael Porter. He's going to play this season, and if he doesn't play, the Nuggets are in trouble. Like, if he goes out to injury, there's just not really a guy there. So I think during the regular season, they've got what they're looking for, but going into the postseason, not. And I think they can make some moves. But, now we can get to JaMychal Green, because there was a moment in time, there was a couple hours where Denver had lost out on Jerami Grant, and it was just like, well, now what? Are they going to go and sign Millsap for a bunch? You looked around. JaMychal Green, I know this is kind of crazy to say. Actually, let me first go back. Let me backtrack just a second. Harrison, let's forget about title windows. Let's forget about 2021. Let's talk about 2021 through 2023. Would you rather have Jerami Grant for all three of those at $20 million a year, or would you rather not have Jerami Grant at all and lose him for nothing?
Probably not at all. Probably not at all. Because you can get a JaMychal Green for a fraction of the price. That's why.
And that's the kind of the point I'm bringing here is I think that Denver having Jerami Grant for $20 million in 2021, it's like, okay, we'll take it. That's like an overpay, but whatever. It's 1 year. You'll take it because he makes you better this year. I think Denver's probably worse in the playoffs, at least right now, without him. But going forward, you start to talk about other guys that you have to pay and building your roster and adding pieces around the periphery. You start overpaying by a guy by I don't know, 40, 50, 60%. Then I think that really hamstrings your ability to be flexible going forward. So I happen to agree with you. I just think it's the first year you prefer Jerami Grant. Second and third, you probably prefer nobody. But JaMychal Green, to me, this is the second question. Would you rather have Jerami Grant for $20 million or JaMychal Green for $7.5?
It's so easy to me. It's JaMychal Green. Right. JaMychal Green is a really quality player, guys. If you remember back to that Clippers series, he was really good against Denver. Yeah, I'm looking at the game log right now. Game 2, JaMychal Green, 26 minutes, 10 points, 11 rebounds. Game 6, 11 points. Game 7, 11.6 rebounds. This guy's a really quality player. And speaking to people that kind of cover the Clippers, just a couple people in the media, they're hurting that they lost JaMychal Green.
Yeah,
he was a significant piece to what the Clippers are doing. Yeah. He can shoot threes. He shot it pretty much as well from three as Jerami Grant did last season. He's a much better rebounder than Grant. He's a much more physical defender. Now, he doesn't have the defensive versatility that Grant does and the ability to go out and guard wings and whatnot, but he's a very solid player that Denver is really happy to have. They were high on him for a while, and it was Denver's plan B. So they got their plan B.
Right. Especially once like Covington was gone and maybe there were some of those other guys, but if we watched it, we talked about it as that series was happening.
The Clippers replaced Green with Ibaka, so they're probably not hurting as bad as they were, but they were upset when they lost them in that time. Let's talk about that,
though. Let's talk about it for just 1 second, Ibaka, because I think Ibaka's obviously a fantastic player, a little long in the tooth, but their problem last year was they couldn't guard Jokic. I mean, that was their problem. Yeah. They were not built to stop Jokic, and he murdered him. Ibaka's really good. I don't know that he can stop Jokic either. Like those undersized, stretchy guys, they're really good against most guys, but Jokic is too smart. He's too strong. Yeah. Like people don't realize he's one of the 5 strongest centers in the league as well. So,
but Ibaka is not quite that mold of just the big, athletic, dumb center that Jokic dominates. Ibaka's smart about it too.
There's plenty of smart, but undersized. Jokic, again, this is part of what's so great about him. Like your PJ Tuckers, he's even smaller, but I'm talking about your smart guys that know what to do. Jokic is smarter than all but 3 or 4 players in the NBA, so you can't outsmart him. That's not your advantage. So if that goes to Jokic, then the size end up going to Jokic and all of that, then that's what it is. Defensively, of course, now he's going to have to guard the perimeter and this or that. But again, the Ibaka of right now, I'm not sure is the Ibaka of 5-6 years ago. So he's going to knock down some shots. He's going to stretch the court, but I don't know that he is going to replace. Anyway, that's a story for another day because we're 5, 6, 7 months away from where we have to worry about matching up with the Clippers in the playoffs. But getting back to JaMychal Green, when we were watching that playoff series this last year, I thought Montrezl Harrell was barbecue chicken against Jokic, as did the rest of the world. It was fun to watch on Twitter.
Everybody except the Lakers thought that.
Apparently, well, I mean, look, he's going to get the old treatment. This is going to be the DeMarcus Cousins this treatment. When he's got Anthony Davis and LeBron James alongside him, he's going to look really good against Jokic. So I'm sure
I had to throw that one in there.
Yeah, he's going to do this one. But and then you go to Zubac, who was just getting absolutely murdered by him. The only guy that I thought out there that I was like, who's making Jokic play at 90% is JaMychal Green. So that just shows you that JaMychal Green is a good defender against bigs. That's why I say I think he's a better small power forward defender than Jerami Grant. So JaMychal Green, and also he can shoot the three. A career, I think 37. His career 3-point percentage is pretty solid. I'll look it up here as we're talking, but it was he's a guy that is not going to be like a dead eye shooter. Yeah, career 37.4, and that's on pretty decent volume for the minutes he played. So I think that JaMychal Green will be a guy that Nuggets fans like doing the role that he does.
Yeah, I mean, again, the thing with Jerami Grant is that he just went out with such a crescendo. Like, he just looked so great in those last series, and he looked like an absolute piece that we couldn't miss. It makes me, the thing you're left with is thinking like, okay, cool. Is this the Jerami Grant we're going to have from now on? Because this is like a major addition to the offense and to the defense. But I also remember feeling that way about JaVale McGee. Like we played we played JaVale, we played the Lakers, and he had one like insanely dominant series, and I was like, we can never let JaVale McGee go. And then we way overpaid him, and he just flamed out. So I'm not saying that that's exactly what would happen with Jerami Grant, but it can't be ignored that he, and a lot of this, had we signed him, we would sweep this other side under the rug. We wouldn't talk about how he was a huge negative throughout the season, but since he is gone, it's worth bringing up. We
would talk about that if they signed him for $20 million.
Yeah,
right,
totally.
Right.
And he, the question then would be okay, wow, is he going to be able to live up to this salary? Because that's going to be a monumental chunk of our cash moving forward. So he can't just be a glue guy anymore. He's got to be a guy. And does that eat into MPJ's development? Are they fighting for some sort of minutes every now and again? Does this help with the log jam that we're just constantly faced with as a team that just constantly is drafting so well? So fuck it, right? I that's kind of where I'm at with this. I feel that way. I feel like JaMychal Green, he can hit threes. We've got such great players on our squad. I mean, I can wring my hands about it, but fuck it, fuck him. Let's go, baby.
So all right, we talked about JaMychal Green. I think he'll be good. Starter, backup. I'm not even sure how that's going to shake up right now at the minutes. I mean, Millsap, his minutes have been declining every single year, and I think he's in line to decline even more because especially with a condensed season, theoretically you want him to go. The other thing about JaMychal Green, I'll say really quick, is that I think that value, again, this is where Jerami Grant and the contract and JaMychal Green's contract is tough. JaMychal Green is a tradable contract. It's 2 years, $7.5 million. So if Denver got to a point going at the trade deadline, he's done his job. He's carried you through. Bol's come along. I don't know. Maybe this happens. Bol or Zeke Naji has come along, and you're like, you know what? We can trust these guys to the minutes that we need them to play. He then becomes a tradable asset. And if you stack his contract on top of, say, Will Barton or Gary Harris's, now you're in the ballpark of a max contract player or this or that. So obviously you have to add, if you're trying to get a max contract player, a Paul George or a Bradley Beal or something like that, you're going to have to throw in the things the team would actually want. So like a Bull, like a Picks, like whatever. But now you have guys that can make those contracts work, that are on contracts that teams would be fine absorbing or taking in. But let's move on to the next one, which is Torrey Craig, who's gone. And I see a lot of comments in the comment section right now. And one of the things people are saying, and you're not wrong, Who's going to guard Kawhi and LeBron? Because Jerami Grant held Kawhi Leonard to 0 points in the fourth quarter, although some of that was probably Kawhi holding himself to 0 points in the fourth quarter. I'd never seen Kawhi look feeble before, but that's exactly what he looked like in that fourth quarter of Game 7. But Jerami Grant gave a valiant effort against those guys and made some big plays. Torrey Craig's now gone. The Nuggets extended a qualifying offer, then rescinded it, basically just saying, we're not bringing you back. And I wonder, in part, some of this was, if you do bring him back and Jerami Grant's gone, guess who's Malone's going to lean on in the fourth quarter of close games? It's going to be Torrey Craig. I guarantee you that Michael Porter could make leaps and bounds improvement, but it would be very hard. So I think part of this was taking the training wheels off and saying, hey, we need Michael Porter this year. We can't have any safety blanket to help you beat Atlanta on Tuesday night in Game 5 of the regular season. We gotta get this progress here. But the flip side of that is Denver does not have a stopper above 6'4" and Gary Harris, and they don't have one that can guard a 3, namely. So Harrison, to explain to me why this isn't concerning.
I mean, it's super concerning, and that's why I said at the top of the show that's got to be their number one priority during the season before the trade deadline. Go out and get like a Trevor Ariza, who I'm pretty sure would actually be available right now. He's deep on the bench in Oklahoma City. I've got to think they're going to rely on PJ Dozier defensively a lot to just kind of be that spot assignment type guy. And here's another thing, guys. Will Barton during the regular season, what he did defensively was probably underrated. Will Barton had the best defensive season of his career this last year. And he was obviously not available in the playoffs. The sense I get just talking to people around the team is that they have really high expectations for Barton this season. And I know people within the organization think, hey, if we had Barton for that Lakers series, we're pushing them to 6. We're pushing them to 7. Maybe we're pushing them in that 7th game. Yeah. The injury, though, is super scary with Barton because he's been working out in Miami really since he left the bubble. I don't know what his status is for the start of the regular season. I feel like that's a little up in the air. But I just get the sense that Denver wants to rely on Will Barton and just sees him as a huge part of what they're going to do.
What do you think about Dozier as well, Eric? Like, I mean, he's a little bit smaller, but man, Dozier's a guy I love his defense, team defense and on-ball defense.
Yeah, it's funny like that 3 spot in the NBA is the trickiest. It's because you have a lot of like really good guys that PJ Dozier can match up against, and then you have like freaks of nature that are at that position. You have like LeBron James, you have Kawhi Leonard, you have like that sometimes you just run into on a night where we're just not going to be able to do anything. Like PJ Dozier can't guard LeBron James. Like Will Barton can't guard LeBron James reliably. Right. I saw Noah Vonleh like match up against LeBron James for a while. Like
there was that one game 3 years ago.
One game. But at least like I saw like a physical comparison, even though obviously LeBron James is a million times better than he is. I'm just saying, like, I don't know, man. Like, defense is going to be a big question. It's like, I almost just wonder. I mean, the real question is like, does this team change its philosophy entirely? Does this become?
Well, they got like, Campazzo. Michael Porter Jr. is going to take on a huge role here.
Totally. I don't know. Could they become like the ball is popping early 10-year Malone Nuggets again? Is that on the table?
I love this Hastings match because this has been Scott Hastings has been saying for a while. If your team's an offensive team, just lead into offense. And I think I'm with him on a lot of it, but you still have to be good defensively. Like, I mean, we learned. I was the guy banging the drum about like defense doesn't win championships. Like it's defense and offense does, but if you're a better offense team, it's all a measurement. If you're great at offense, you don't have to be as good on defense. But Denver's going to have to be somewhat good on defense just because the teams at the top are good at defense, and you're not going to score on the Lakers 120 points per game. So you're going to have to be able to get some stops. So it's a real concern. I think that, again, if Denver went into the playoffs with the lineup as currently constructed, even if you make a theoretical leap for Michael Porter Jr. and maybe even Bol, I still feel like that's a team that's very susceptible to a great wing. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, LeBron James, Luka Doncic, maybe even a Brandon Ingram. You don't want to get Rodney Hooded, where you get into a series and you're like, we are the better team, but we just don't have anybody that can guard Rodney Hood, and he keeps scoring 25 a game. And
we've got we've got the leak in the boat that like we just cannot plug. They just
the leak in the boat, exactly a way to put it. The other deal, and maybe we talk about a Torrey replacement. Maybe it's Greg Whittington, who I know when we did our free agency board, Harrison, you had Whittington at the very top of your list. Number one guy, Greg Whittington. No, I'm just kidding. This is a guy I'd never even heard of until the other day. So give me the rundown, Harrison. Who's this guy?
Yeah, not official yet, but it seems like Denver wants to sign this guy to a two-way spot. And the other part of that move is that they want to elevate Bol to a standard NBA deal. And
really
I've heard that Bol could compete for minutes at the 3 and 4 next year as a backup. So that's a super fascinating subplot.
People need to understand this thing that Tim Connelly really hyped Nikola Jokic before I had ever heard of him. Like at the first time of the draft, he was talking about him, and Jokic wasn't even coming over for a year. Then they were really hyping him. Like, wait till you guys see this guy. He just had an incredible year. Yeah. Turns out he was right. It wasn't. You always think when somebody hypes their guys that you're like, all right, Tim, we don't have to sell me on it. Like, what do you want me to do? But Tim really has done this for him. He's done it for Jamal Murray. He's done it for Michael Porter. Remember how much buzz there was for Michael Porter at heading into Summer League, and then he tweaks his knee and doesn't get to play. But they were hyping him left and right, and you're thinking, like, dude, are they putting too much pressure on Michael Porter right now by hyping him as much? And the answer was no, because he's actually is everything talent-wise. He's everything that people said about him. So when I start hearing about Bol and how they're so high on him, and I saw all these other fan bases and people saying, like, you know, Bol isn't that great of a value prospect or this or that, and then the Nuggets front office is saying, well, yes, he is. They were not saying that yes, he is, not like you can't trade him for Drew or anything like that. They never made a statement like that. But they're hyping him as in like, hey, no, we really actually believe in him. I am optimistic that Bol is going to surprise a lot of people just because of how positive they seem to be on him.
Yeah, and the word is he's been in Denver a lot during the offseason. He's been around coaches. He's been around the Nuggets player development guys, and he's apparently been working his ass off from everything I've heard. Yeah. So Denver's looking to reward him here by bumping up to an actual roster spot. And then, to get to Greg Whittington, who's rumored to be the other two-way signing, a 27-year-old guy on a two-way. That might be one of the older guys to go on a two-way, but Greg Whittington played at Galatasaray in Turkey last season. So he's coming in from overseas.
Really strong squad.
Sure, love it. Yeah. I'm a little behind on my watching the league, but you go and tell us.
And who he is a 6'8" combo forward. He's an efficient shooter, shot 51% from three last season, not on a ton of attempts, but on 3 threes per game, I'm pretty sure. A good rebounder, 5.5 rebounds per game, 12.4 points. So he seems to me to be a happy medium between Jerami Grant and Torrey Craig. That's the kind of player that he seems to be. A two-way guy who's a pretty good athlete, can play defense. Seems like he's got a pretty capable three-point shot. He seems to be a bit of a guy that's going to be in between Jerami Grant and Torrey Craig, not in terms of impact, just in terms of what his game is kind of like.
Man, I kind of like this, that the Nuggets are like always looking outside of the NBA for talent. If we're going to continually get scorned by American NBA players, let's get people that want to be here. It's exciting for them to come to Denver. I mean, it sucks that we have to sell the city to people, and for some reason they're not buying anyway.
Don't like it. No, not a fan.
I don't like it either. But if this dude likes Denver, he's really excited. He's a great defender. I'm all about it. Let's do it.
So if you look at the Tim Connelly two-way these out of left field guys, Torrey Craig, well, that panned out. He was an NBA player. Devon Purcell didn't pan out. That one wasn't true. You get Kenrich Williams, is an NBA player. You get Terrence Davis, is a very good NBA player, probably the best of that whole bunch outside of his off-court issues. But so when I see the Whittington guy, Denver's 3-1, I think, if we just look at the guys that have had this opportunity with Denver. So the odds to me are okay, I'm optimistic that this guy can turn into something. The other piece of the trade, I mean, the Nuggets did trade they did trade Malik Beasley and Juancho Hernan-Gomez, not just for the 22nd pick, but also for Keita Bates-Diop, who is this guy. By the way, when I was researching players for the Denver in the draft, and I was looking at wingspan, crazy wingspan, height to wingspan disparities, because of how much I liked my guy Paul Reed, one of the guys that popped off was Keita Bates-Diop, who has an incredible wingspan. If you just talk about physical attributes, Keita Bates-Diop actually has some insane wingspan, length, like just mobility. So I don't know, because I hadn't seen very much at all from KBD. Like, it haven't really heard a whole lot about KBD, but at least he's another guy that you could say is there that, I don't know. I mean, Greg Whittington, Keita Bates-Diop, maybe they're competing for, like, breaking in case of glass.
Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. This is going to ruin your night, but
oh, no.
Our guy Mike Singer reported today that the Nuggets might not guarantee Keita Bates-Diop's contract for next season, which would leave one open roster spot, which I believe Denver's going to fill with a backup center. So your guy, KBD, I don't know what his future is.
I don't want to say it's my guy. I was just bringing up the roster. I was just saying
KBD?
KBD is TBD. All right, we'll pour one out for Keita. We barely do you. All right, the last one here on our list here to talk about is Campazzo, who we've talked about a little bit, but it's official now. Or actually, is it official? I don't think it is official, but it sounds like
nothing's official. RJ Hampton isn't even a Nugget yet.
RJ Hampton isn't even officially a Nugget. Maybe we should cut our intro off of this.
The election we had a month ago is not official. Nothing's official.
There's nothing official, apparently. I wanted to recount on that Western Conference Finals. I swear it's 2-1.
Not official. Unofficial. Asterisk.
Unofficial. So Campazzo, though, it looks like he's going to be on the team, and here's why I bring him up. We've already talked about him, so if you want to go back previous podcast episodes, of course, we're available on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts, DNVR Nuggets podcasts. Check it out. But if you go back and look what we talked about, his skill set, great passer, super teeny. So, again, the defense thing is going to be an issue, but Denver now has Jamal Murray as the starter. Monte Morris is probably the backup, I assume, unless he's competing with Campazzo, which I think would be, that'd be tough. You got Campazzo, and you've got Dozier. That's a lot of point guards. That's 4 point guards. So if you look at 4 guard spots, where a guy's playing, I think Gary Harris is the shooting guard, the starting shooting guard. I think Jamal Murray is obviously the starting point guard. But I wouldn't be surprised if Will Barton was the backup small forward, and that you'd throw him out of the guard rotation. So now you look at it, is the backup Campazzo and Monte, a duo there? Is it, is PJ Dozier get in the mix somehow in that frame? But that's what I'm looking at, is that this signals that maybe Denver's going to play a lot smaller than they did last season at the guard spots.
Yeah, I think they're going to look smaller, but that bench unit should be more potent offensively. I wonder if Denver kind of looked at what happened in the playoffs, and yes, there was an injury to Will Barton, who's like can really initiate stuff on the offensive end. I wonder if Denver looked at the playoffs and was like, we could really use some more like playmakers in the backcourt. Like we could really use some more guys just to make stuff happen. Because if you remember, and funny enough, this is what Michael Porter Jr. said, but it was just the Murray Jokic show, and it was great for Denver. It got Denver to the Western Conference Finals. But
great point, Harrison. I like this.
It just kind of felt like they needed, some more initiators. Campazzo's that guy. I think they're going to try to play Campazzo and Monte Morris together. 2 guys who can like run pick and roll, get into the paint, create types of offense. I don't know how it's going to be defensively, but it seems like Denver's pretty confident that it's going to be effective. So I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued.
By the way, Rick Carlisle's Dallas teams, not just this iteration of them, but for the last decade, have all featured 2-3 point guards.
Yep.
And because he loves, he's a little bit of an overbearer. Like he really likes to have his thumb on the scale of what's happening, but he also likes to have a lot of decision makers and ball handlers. And to your point, the ball gets popping when you have a lot of guys that can can make plays. So maybe the ball at Ball Arena, the ball gets popping now a little bit more than ever before. And again, we're talking about regular season. Do I think that's going to work against the giant Los Angeles Lakers? Probably not. It probably gets murdered if Campazzo gets matched up with LeBron in a playoff series. Mismatch, quite a bit of a mismatch. But in the regular season, I do think that there's something, too, that can really facilitate some great offense. And who benefits from that? Not just the whole team, but also Michael Porter. Because so often, especially in the playoffs, when it did devolve so much into that two-man game, which was a great two-man game, maybe one of the top 3 two-man games in all the NBA, but Michael Porter, it felt like he was freezed out of that. So maybe you add a couple more playmakers to the rotation and it works. Eric, what do you think about, we had long boys, now we're going small ball. What do you think?
Well, I wonder if Campazzo can be like a JJ Barea type kind of like.
That's kind of who he is. Yeah,
and those squads used to give us. How many times was JJ Barea just like ruined our night?
Campazzo, by the way, comps to JJ Barea. That's like his That's what everybody keeps saying. He's a little flashier, but maybe, but he's just so teeny and he kind of plays like him.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm really wondering like how intentionally they are trying to reshape their rosters to change the way that they are philosophically approaching basketball, or if they are just getting good players that they're seeing that they just cannot let pass up, that they are bringing into the fold, and they're sort of thinking like, we'll just get a bunch of good players and it will work out, kind of thing. Tim has sort of mentioned that he looks at it both ways, it seems like. So I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I could really see them like going small. Like, I'm trying to imagine the way that the starting lineup looks, like with Michael Porter Jr. like really becoming the third spoke on that wheel. With
is Paul Millsap going to be the starting four?
Yeah, I was going to say we should go through like what do we know what the starting lineup's going to look like?
So it's interesting because I mentioned this briefly at the top because I just think that you don't want to play him too many minutes throughout the year, and it's going to be a condensed season.
Yeah.
So my hunch would be that if you got him to 20, 22 minutes a game in the regular season, that's a good number. And to do that, you probably have to bring him off the bench unless you're doing that weird start the first half, start the second half.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
I kind of think no, but
so is it JaMychal Green or is it Michael Porter Jr. at the 4?
I could see all iterations of. I mean, I think it's too soon, honestly, to say that. I really do. I mean, look, I think it's too soon for the Nuggets to even say this. Look, yesterday they thought it would be Jerami Grant, so I think all of this is kind of in flux at the moment. But JaMychal Green is 29 or 30. I can't remember. I think he's 29. So I think he's probably in line to be the workhorse of the power forward spot.
Yeah,
I think
he can eat up some minutes.
Yeah, Paul Millsap is something else. So I don't know. So we'll see. But I do think to kind of wrap this all up and bring it back, I do think you look at it and say this is the year of MPJ. And if it's not, then the Nuggets are in big trouble. And
big trouble.
To me, I think that's a great thing. We talked about the Nuggets taking the training wheels off of Michael Malone. And look, the Denver Nuggets made it, I think, as far as you realistically could have expected them to this year. They weren't better than the Lakers. They lost to the Lakers in the way that I think they probably should have. Maybe Anthony Davis doesn't make that 3 and this gets a little more competitive, but
right.
I just think it's safe to say that the Lakers were probably better than the Nuggets, and that's not – I just don't think that's controversial.
Right.
But, going in – so they accomplished what they needed to with the wheels off, and Michael Porter got this or that. But going forward, like, this is it. You got to find out if Michael Porter is your third guy. You got to find out if he is or isn't. You got to find out if he can play 82 games, or I guess 72 games. You got to see if he can play 30 minutes per game. You got to see if he can grow up defensively, and I do think that it was beneficial for him to find out that there was nowhere to hide on the defensive end for him in a playoff series because he was all bubble. Second team all bubble in the seeding round. And I think if you just had that and the season ends right there, I think Michael Porter goes in the offseason and goes, what do I need to work on defense for? Guys, I'm second team all bubble. Joker wasn't all bubble. Murray wasn't all bubble. I'm all bubble. But when you get into a playoff and you hop on social media, which we know he can get on social media, and literally every analyst, Charles Barkley, or you go to television, national analysts, every local analyst, blog boy, everything is being like, wow, Michael Porter can't guard a chair if it has wheels on it. Then I think like at some point he has to say, okay, and I think he did. I think he looked at that and said, as good as I am, there's a hole in my game, and like I'm the guy getting targeted. So I hope that this year he has to make that leap, because if he doesn't, all this other stuff we're talking about, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. They need Michael Porter to be that third guy for him this year.
It's absolutely true. And like the thing about Michael Porter, his shortcomings on defense were all mistakes. It wasn't like he was physically unable to match up against whoever it is that he was being put up against. It. Like he would be rotated into the wrong position. He'd be running across. And I mean, I got to think that those things can be learned. Like that's just, having awareness. And I mean, that's
everybody learns them at different stages, though. I mean, I will say that. And he does seem to be on the slower learning scale, but he's just so talented. Exactly.
And you got to think that his physicality and his athleticism can make up for so much transgression on the defensive side from like just a schematic standpoint. But he just they just like make it. They put him in a mixer and he's just lost all the goddamn time.
Yeah.
So I feel like you can absolutely get better from that. You can absolutely improve that.
I like this question. How much can you work on defense on the offseason? Not much. I mean, you can work
it's tough.
You can work on your body, but I think that
you can watch film.
When watching film, but I really think that defense is a lot about reps. And so some of this, he didn't play those reps early on, but let's be honest, guys. I think the thing that made Malone frustrated so much during the regular season was, and you guys know, you listen to the show, like I thought Malone needed to trust him a little bit more and do this, but it didn't feel like Porter was always making improvements in those areas. It felt like Malone was like, dude, we go over this every time. Like, how do you not know what you're supposed to do in this moment? So I do hope that going into this season, Michael Porter, it's not that he feels victimized or this or that, but he feels responsible because the team desperately needs him to be good at that. And if he does make that leap, the sky's the limit for him, and this can be great. It reminds me of when the Denver Nuggets almost brought in Dwayne Wade in 2017. And it was like, is Dwayne Wade better than Gary Harris? And we're like, yes, of course. Gary Harris had maybe his best season ever that next year. They didn't. The deal falls apart. Dwayne Wade sends a strongly worded tweet saying how they wowed him using the own Dwayne Wade.
The greatest free agent presentation in the history of free agent presentations.
I hope that they put that tweet on the wall or something.
Yeah, they really should, like hang it in the rafters and like it's a championship. But that doesn't happen in Gary Harris blossoms. Okay, so sometimes Jameer Nelson gets shipped out, Jamal Murray makes a leap, and I think that Michael Porter, if he is the player we all believe him to be. You lose Jerami Grant, well, Michael Porter steps up, and it turns out to be a blessing in disguise. Perhaps also a blessing in disguise for Bol, who now you look at JaMychal Green as one of those two guys starting, Millsap being the replacement, but he's the replacement at both power forward and center. Yeah. So you basically have a 3-man rotation. I think Michael Porter will slide and play a lot of 4, so you kind of have that filled out. But there are minutes available, especially in a season where there's an enormous COVID risk. I mean, I highly doubt we make it through the entire season without a single Denver Nuggets player getting COVID. Like, somebody's going to get COVID. If the NFL and Major League Baseball have taught us anything, it's somebody's going to get it. Injuries are going to happen. That happens every single year. Yep. And then just 72 games. These guys are going to be playing every other day for 4 months. There's going to be times when old man Millsap, hey, we just wants a rest. There's going to be times when Jokic is like, we just need to rest Jokic. He's a little grouchy, and we can tell he's tired. He needs a couple nights off. So I think Bol is going to get his opportunity, and that to me makes me very, very excited, very happy.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I put this on Twitter too. Like, can you just see a world in which the threesome to replicate the Golden State Warriors that we always thought we had with Jamal, Gary, and Jokic actually was MP3 or MPJ stepping in to that Clay role and just raining threes down, and Jamal's getting threes.
This is possible because how many times do we see like Jamal Murray when he gets hot? He's so hot, like he just can't miss. Like he gets into those zones like a Curry or like a Clay, where it's like, I mean, he had 2 50-point games in 3 games in the playoffs. Like not very many players can do that. It takes a player whose ceiling when they're on fire is I just am not missing for like 7 shots in a row. And Michael Porter has that too, though.
Yeah, cross that with the Bubble Porter, with all Bubble Porter.
Porter, 37 points and 30 points in back-to-back games, out the gate after not.
He was still like the Nuggets' best shooter in the playoffs as a rookie, as a freaking rookie.
I mean, just allow your mind to go there, like what that could look like. You have Jokic in the center of that machine, and he's just feeding these two on either sides of the court, and they're slinging it across, and and even JaMychal Green, who's very capable at shooting threes. Like, I don't know if he ever makes it in the starting lineup, but that's just like this is like what we've talked about for Jokic. It's like having him surrounded by shooters. Like, that is the most lethal addition of Nikola Jokic. So, we're going to lose some defense with this move, but
maybe a lot.
But listen, like, there's more than one way to win a basketball game. Like, you just need to get more points than the other team, however you do it.
Millsap was bad in the playoffs, but again, and that just gets us to now you got those contracts that you can flip, so you make it through the regular season. I still think Denver's going to be a very good regular season team. I think they have a chance. I'm not picking them to be the 1 seed because I think the West got better, and I think there's a lot of teams out there that are going to compete, and the Lakers are, of course, the Lakers, so I'm not predicting them, but I do think they have a chance to be in the mix for that if everything breaks right for them. But I think they're going to be good, and I think they're in position to pivot at the trade deadline. This was still, to me, a not great first day of free agency. I think anytime you don't get your number 1 plan, we have to say that this was a bad day for the Denver Nuggets. But I think they rebounded in a way that, to me, you step back and look at the big picture and say it's all there. And if I can just give one little thing here before we go. People were laughing at me when I thought, oh man, how do I have my coat on here? Hold on, let me take off the coat for a second here. I just want to look at it. It's fun. People were texting me like, that lineup's not going to play. Hey, guys, I know. It's RJ Hampton's probably not going to play at all this year. Bol, like, who knows? But you know what? It's off season. Let's dream big, baby.
RJ Hampton in the Wancho jersey has me feeling some type of way, though.
It's all kind of, you know what though? He's as excited to be here as Wancho was. Like, he's got that glow. He's got that just je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi. You know how they talk about like how you can take the human circulatory system and like wrap it around the earth 3 times? Like, how far can we get laying these guys head to foot to head to foot to head? Are we Is this a football field? Like, what are we looking at here?
This is a long boy lineup that has a lot of like hyper talented players. So hey, if you can't have fun and dream every now and then, what are we doing watching sports?
What are we doing?
What are we doing? Are we having fun? Or are we here just to like
Look
piss
how
and
cool
moan with
all
each
these
other?
players are. This is the coolest team in the league right here.
Coolest team in the league, baby.
Look how cool these guys are.
You heard R.J. Hampton. This is the best place for him to have landed.
Hey, he's not wrong about that. That makes me think he's a smart dude, so I like it. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us here as we kind of work through this and kind of talk through the different scenarios that happened. It was fun. If you're new to the show, hit the like button, hit subscribe on YouTube. You should always watch us on YouTube. The video quality is supreme quality.
You can watch it. You can watch it on your TV if you have one of those smart TVs.
That's right.
TV.
I just learned
On your
about
TV.
that the other day. It's a TV. And then, of course, this is a podcast, the DNVR Nuggets podcast. So if you don't know, now you know. Coming to you 5 days a week. All right, everybody. Be safe.